basically changed everything about myself to fit in with other people, the way that I talk, the music I listen to, the way that I laugh. Started skipping school, selling drugs, having sex outside of marriage, all by the time I reached the 7th and 8th grade.
Oh, wow.
And ended up getting actually suspended from public school systems 10 times because I was that far from who I was.
Thriving in Tandem. It's a podcast for you, the married entrepreneur that wants to win in business and marriage at the same time.
Welcome to Thriving in Tandem.
All right, honey. So you know how we talk about how our past, both the good and the bad, kind of starts to shape our present and even our future, right? And even the tragic parts of all of our stories can be used for good. I mean, just even like us, so what we're doing, a lot of it is shaped based on our past, even our childhood, right?
Exactly. And it's like so great that we can take our past hurts and be able to help people move forward with them.
So today's guests both have a tremendous story. Now, we met Darryll Stinson through a mutual friend, and we heard his story. But then also, when I dug into Brittany's story, which is a little harder because she's a little bit more mysterious. From a Google side. she's not as easily found. But what I've found was I'm like, oh, we really need to dig into her story too, because I'm like, okay, wow. So Darryll and Brittany Stinson are power couples for sure. They're founders of Seeding Greatness, a movement of leaders restoring the planet and helping humanity heal through their stories and transformational services. So obviously what we're going to talk about is right in their wheelhouse. And they're also licensees and organizers of TEDx Alexander Park. And they're just fresh off of their last event.
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of stories there too.
And what's cool is, everybody knows TEDx, right? Or TED Talks. I've never met anyone that actually had their own TEDx Talks. so not only has spoken on TED Talks, but have
They're
actually
famous.
host their own one. Yeah. Darryll is former Division I athlete and was a top 100 athlete in 2008. And also is also founder of Second Chance Athletes and the author of the best-selling book, Who Am I After Sports? And now he teams up with his wife with Seeding Greatness. And Brittany also is a dynamic powerhouse, been in a corporate world, and has built movements of leaders impacting worlds with their stories. And so we really are privileged to have Darryll and Brittany. Darryll and Brittany, welcome to our show.
Hey.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. So we're excited to kind of dig in, and as we kind of set up the intro about our stories, as I'm looking at both of your stories, 2 things or 3 things struck out at me. Is number one, it seems like it's a miracle that you're married and happily married, and then working together and enjoying working together.
And then something else big.
And what's that?
They have 4 kids.
Oh, 4 kids. And they love them. And everything I've seen, they definitely prioritize each other and their kids while they're killing it in business and helping other people. But the stories, your stories, it's like, a lot of people don't overcome some of these challenges for themselves, let alone then leave a successful life, not just individually, but in a relationship. So Brittany, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about who Brittany is.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. It's funny to hear all of that because it's definitely like the frosting, and then we can get to the actual like cupcake underneath and talk about the real. Because it's been we'll be married 10 years in December. Awesome. So that in and of itself is a miracle and a testament to God's faithfulness. And I grew up in a really small town in Michigan. So there were 2 streetlights in my town, and I graduated with less than 100 people.
Hey, that's 2 more streetlights than my town had growing up.
in Hawaii.
So mine was technically classified as a village. Is yours a village?
His is an island.
Honey, let's finish. The town I grew up, Javi. I don't know back then what was considered. I don't even know what it was considered back then. It is considered a town now.
Very small town, really not exposed to a whole lot. And so when I went to college, it was like, okay, all bets are off. Any type of like keeping it together, class president, all A student, honor honor society, all those things, was like, okay, we did that. Now let's go party and have fun. And, you know, mom's not there to try to keep a curfew and things like that. So getting to college came with a lot of freedom that I really wasn't ready for. And then my parents were going through a separation at the time and ultimately ended up divorced. And that combination was like this perfect storm for just so much relational, emotional baggage. Alcoholism actually runs in my family. And so for me, that was like my escape, was like drinking. I ended up being a bartender, which was not a good idea.
That's great for an alcoholic.
And so everybody I was working with, you know, that was very normal for them. And I was working in that industry. And so it was a long 4 years of, you know, actually keeping decent grades, but just a hot mess any other time of the week. So it was like barely making it to class, terrible relationships, really didn't value myself at all. And so I just, you know, accepted any type of poor relationship, friend or, you know, romantic partner at all. And so then my senior year, though, I actually found a church and had never been to a Pentecostal church or a church where the Holy Spirit was moving at all. It felt like I got hit, like I had no idea what this amazing thing was that I just found, but I just knew I needed more of it. And so I started attending the last semester of my senior year in college. I was at this church every Sunday, no matter what. Like my car was still at the bar, but I was borrowing my roommate's car to get to church. Like smelled like the night before, but I was making it there because I needed whatever was there on Sundays. And that really changed the trajectory of my life after that. I stayed in that town. I changed. I wanted to go be a physician's assistant. I stayed in that town. I kept waitressing. I kept around those people and that group of people, and ended up getting my master's in leadership. And it was in the same college town where I had been, but it was in a new version of me and a new life with God and this new walk. And yeah, so Darryll was at the same church, but at a different time. And so when he had his own season of finding that church and then walking away. And then I found the church. And then eventually we ended up doing Bible studies together. And so I would say that's where I met my husband, was at that church. We did know each other in college before that. But everything after that has really been a building on itself of like, okay, God, what's next in our life? How do you want to use my gifts, my story, my past? And so we've been in ministry. I've been in corporate. And we have 4 kids now. We've had a kid in every city that we've done ministry. They were done moving.
Are you sure?
You gotta plant that seed, right? Wherever you go.
We're not moving anymore.
So are your kids? I'm surprised your kids aren't named by the city that they were born in. At least they're nicknames now. You do that. That's funny.
Yeah. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. But it really is just a story of a whole lot of grace and finding myself. And then over the last couple of years, you know, it was through the pandemic, we left our staff roles at the church and launched our own business. Darryll published his book, and so we've been on this entrepreneur journey for the last few years. And that was a whole new season, which y'all probably know. Entrepreneurship is a very close mirror to everything that you internally are working through. You know, when it's your own business and you're not working for anybody else, and it's only you and your stuff and your calling. Yeah. It's this magnifying glass. And so that's the journey I've been walking, is really finding my voice, getting back to this authentic version of me. What am I here to say? What am I here to share with the world that God has given me? And it's been a really incredible journey.
Yeah, and what we say is entrepreneurship just amplifies or magnifies what's already going on personally. So when you're working together, it just amplifies what's going on at home, right? You know, how you communicate and resolve conflict, all that stuff. And once you start working together, it just amplifies any little cracks in the armor. So Darryll, what about you? Now we're gonna hear your side. What's your story, and then kind of bring this all together.
Yeah. So now that I used to tell my story, and I used to say I grew up in a small town. When I married her, it was like can't be 2 stoplights. We've got 25.
Hey, I got 0 stoplight over here, and it still doesn't have a stoplight.
But yeah, it's inner city life, in the streets. Was an all A student, goody two shoes boy, and essentially because I was made fun of for the gap in my teeth, the darkness of my skin, the fact that I talked like a white boy, quote unquote, and other things, it caused like this insecurity inside of me, and I basically changed everything about myself to fit in with other people, the way that I talk, the music I listen to, the way that I laugh. Started skipping school, selling drugs, having sex outside of marriage, all by the time I reached the seventh and eighth grade.
Oh, wow.
And ended up getting actually suspended from public school systems 10 times because I was that far from who I was.
Wow.
And as bad as it sounds telling it now, at the time when this was happening, it was amazing because I was popular.
Yeah.
I had street cred. Everyone kind of liked me. I had respect. And those are things that I didn't have when I was being Mr. Goody Two Shoes, all A student.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happened alongside this story is I started getting good at sports, as you mentioned in your intro. Became a top 100 athlete. Some of that was genetics, runs in my genes, and then also just God's favor and working a lot. Got a full ride scholarship to play football and basketball at Central Michigan University, and was supposed to be the next best thing to come out of our area in the state of Michigan and play professional sports. But had a back surgery at the end of about the middle of my true freshman year. So supposed to just focus on my education. The coaches were going to honor my scholarship, but they didn't understand that sports wasn't just what I did. It was who I was. It was my identity. It's how I got love and acceptance from other people, because I had noticed that it didn't matter if I talked white or acted black, or if I went to the bonfires or the basement parties, or if I was wearing the right clothes or not wearing the right clothes. Nobody cared, because I was a elite athlete in the spotlight on ESPN and all these other things. And so I couldn't let them take that away from me like that. And so I begged them to let me come back and play, signed a liability waiver, and put my body through 2 years of drug addiction and manipulating the healthcare systems, getting multiple epidural shots in my back, lying to my healthcare providers, and selling drugs to cover the cost of these healthcare expenses, all while being a starting defensive end on a football team that was ranked 23rd in the nation. I was taking too many opioids. They were thinning my blood to the point where every time I made contact on the field, my nose would bleed. Coaches saw that it wasn't allergies, and they kicked me off the team, and I had to face the darkest depression of my life. At the same time, I had a girlfriend who I was planning on marrying. I was dating her for 4.5 years. She left me and got engaged to another man, and it validated this insecurity that who I was authentically wasn't enough to be liked or loved by other people. Girlfriend left. Nobody was checking in on me. You got to imagine going from ESPN, being on a championship football team, everybody always hitting you up, selling drugs, phone always ringing, to when I crashed and burned and went through the depression. I tried to stop selling drugs. The coaches weren't checking on me. I wasn't on ESPN. And so it went from noise to silence. And it was like, see, you don't actually matter on this planet. And that led to multiple suicide attempts, where I ended up in a psychiatric unit in Detroit, Michigan. And at this psychiatric care facility, there was 2 people. One was my grandmother, and another was a woman who I call the woman with green pants. She was a nurse. I couldn't see her because my eyes were swollen shut. And they both came and witnessed to me about Christ and told me to put my faith in and say yes to God. And I did. And that was my moment of coming to Jesus in the psychiatric unit, and it completely transformed my life. It gave me hope, which I didn't have at that time. And I started to build my life from the inside out after I left that place. So, that's kind of my backstory into what would then be working in higher education, rerunning into Brittany again. And then, kind of the story she told you from there of, both, working alongside each other at the church, and then launching my speaking business, and then kind of like doing church with a little bit of speaking on the side. And then, 4 or 5 years ago, getting into, more full-time speaking. And here we are today, speaking, coaching, helping people, to grow their movements with their message.
That's quite a story, you guys. And so how soon after coming out of psychiatric care did you reunite with Brittany?
It's a great question. It was very soon. She probably knows better than I do.
Yeah, it's interesting because the following weekend he was back in Mount Pleasant, which is our college town, and I was back from an internship I had done that summer, and so we ran into each other like on welcome weekend, like within a week-ish of his like incident, and I didn't know that had just happened, but we both ran into each other at that church. Obviously God knew, but we were like, okay, well, we're both on this path of leaving really painful situations very recently. We knew each other before, but it was like in this new context, we can cling to each other and like try to do things in a healthy way, like Bible studies and, hanging out and things like that. So it was very recent after a lot of that happened.
Wow. And then, so you get married, and really it sounds like you've been working together at some form or fashion, even before the business. I mean, did ministry and all that, right? Once you're in ministry, once you're married in ministry, one's in ministry, you're both in ministry.
Yeah.
Right? I'm a pastor's kid, so I get this. And so we can go, I don't want to go into the whole psychology stuff, but our past, we whether we like to admit it or not, we're bringing baggage in, right? Just our different experiences and the way we communicate, the way we see life and all that. You're coming into this marriage, but also now you're doing ministry together. What were some of the challenges that you had to overcome?
He's laughing.
So you think a tandem book part 2.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Inquiring minds want to know.
Oh gosh, what are some of the?
What's the top 2 things?
First one to come to mind.
The first one that comes to mind, I'll tell you very short. It's funny now. It wasn't funny at the time. Story.
Yeah.
So we have been married just a few weeks, and I set the whole table, got all the dinner cooked, got everything ready, salt, pepper shaker. The whole thing was on the dining room table.
Candles too.
Before I made my plate and sat down, Darryll was done eating in the kitchen. I was like so offended. Like, are we not about to sit and have dinner? And he, because this is how he grew up. It was like, hey, we're standing up, we're talking. It's a relational thing.
Well, let me jump in on that.
Yeah.
Because at the time it was just like, number one, complete argument, like hurt her feelings.
Yes, it's funny now.
And then like at the time I did not understand why she was so upset. It did legit. It makes so much sense now. Like we can laugh about it, but at the time I was legit like I married a psycho. Like I have no clue why she's so mad. Food that she ate, like I ate it, it's gone. Like that's what
she made it. She made it. I ate it.
What was taking? Yeah, Brittany, what was taking you so long to get to the table? You snooze, you lose.
Crazy, and so I don't even know. Like I think that that was like probably the biggest flare up in that particular topic. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't the first time that happened. It was kind of like an ongoing thing that like she would make dinner and like I would be standing up eating, and by the time she sits down at the table and eat, like she was expecting to have dinner together and I was just expecting to hang out. Like it just it was not, it didn't register, because when I grew up primarily is like my dad, like it was like fend for yourself, and like we didn't have formal dinner at 6 o'clock ever.
And over the kitchen sink, having a can of tuna you just cracked open.
Ours was at the table Monday through Friday, sitting down, and then clean up. It was a routine. So that story just illustrates like, okay, so we came in with a ton of unspoken expectations, a ton of norms that were opposites. Like we're opposites in every way, literally every way you could be opposites. We are. I like chocolate. He likes vanilla, like literally everything.
That's really ironic for you watching on YouTube. For you watching on YouTube, what she just said is just totally funny.
It's it all, okay?
But that's why you attracted each other.
So it's actually hard for us to relate to couples who are samesies because we don't know. But anyway, so those are like umbrellas, right?
Haley likes bananas.
That's me.
That's me. Yellow on the outside, white on the inside.
That's funny. So unspoken expectations, unspoken
Trauma.
norms. Yeah. And then all of this like baggage. We just had this conversation this morning. Like there are filters that we came into. So anything he would say or I would say, it got ran through this whole filter of everything that we brought in. And so we had to go through a lot of like just learning how to communicate using some similar language, you know, like there's just been so many things that we had to trial and error, really. Like, okay, we've argued about this enough times. What's going on? How do we get on the same side? So there's a very long list of things that we've had to overcome.
Exactly, man. And I think it's a good thing for just all couples. Like, you know, we come in with these cultural norms, these way of believing, behaving, these traditions that may not be what we want to create in our new family dynamic. And so, like, for me, love, intimacy was the fact that we stood up and ate in the kitchen. It meant we were connected. It meant we were doing life together. That's how I interpreted intimacy. That's how I perceived dinner time. But in the context of our combined relationship, that way of being was like creating hurt and pain for her, which ultimately wasn't good for our relationships. And I think that's like I think George Bernard Shaw said, the greatest problem in communication is the illusion that it has occurred. And these unspoken expectations of, hey, this is what dinner is. This is how many kids I want to have. Here's how many times I want to have sex. Hey, here's what success in business looks like for me. Like clearly communicating those expectations and coming to the table so that there's mutual agreement or at least awareness that these expectations exist has been so important to our growing journey. And that's just one of many, many stories to highlight that.
Yeah. So how long did it take where you guys were able to sit down and have dinner and eat at the same time? Was this a process, or you just said something to him one time and then all of a sudden it clicked?
No. Nothing in our marriage has been one and done. It's everything has been a very long
kids,
process. Actually, we sit at the dinner table very little now. We actually are talking about needing to do it more. But what was the most important piece is like, hey, why are you so mad? What's so hurtful? Well, this is the expectation I had. Okay, well, why do you care? Well, yeah, I just didn't know. Like I just literally, he just had no idea that's something that I cared about. So
you mean Darryll didn't read your mind?
Yeah, men are mind readers. Husbands are.
That should be like a prerequisite. Can you read my mind? Exactly. Yes. Okay, let's move forward.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story to share, and you could definitely laugh at it now, but it's, you know, at the moment, right? It's always so important. But what you said is we come in there's with different expectations and make a lot of assumptions. And a lot of the things we argue about isn't really about the issue. It's really about these unsaid expectations and assumptions that we make. And a lot of it comes from our background. And I think sharing those stories, like when you both share your stories of why, right? It's like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Totally makes sense. Like when we went to counseling, that's, you know, funny you're talking about cultural norms. Like when we started dating, Kayla was worried like, oh, he's Asian. Like that's, and she thought I was like really Asian. I go, no, I'm white.
So many people say so many things about different cultures, you know?
But just so important for everyone listening about those unset expectations and making assumptions, but digging into the past. That's why the story is important. Not just about, you know, what you're doing professionally now, but even just how you do relationship. So talk to us now about, you know, you're navigating marriage now, working together. How the two of you come into your groove? Because clearly I know you guys have different roles, which makes sense because you have different giftings, but how did you get to this point?
And I'm sure you have different ideas since you're so opposite.
Yeah. All the time. Different ideas, different things that we see, noticed, different things that we feel are important and urgent that the other person feels like it's not important or urgent at all.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And I like the best thing I can say, which you guys probably would attest to this, is like I don't know if it's like we have these to me, when we're in our stride and we're in our groove, it's because we're doing the things that give us the support we need to do so. Specifically, we're communicating regularly on a daily basis. We have other relationships in our life that we can express. We are regularly seeing counseling either together or in our own individual counseling. Same thing with the business. I would say when we're in our groove, there's at least like every other day we have like a really conscious conversation around the business. And those things, and again, some of it's how do you navigate it? Because I say like in mentorship, in relationship, it can only be as powerful as you're willing to be vulnerable. And so like we got to come to these relationships, to our counselors with like, hey, here's what the actual like root issues are as we can get to. Like, here's what's really going on, right? Because we could go in there and be like, oh, it's fine. Or we can just address the latest argument. Right. But it's like, no. Here's some like real deep emotions that I'm feeling. Like, as long as that we're being that vulnerable in those containers, they're really supportive to help us stay in our groove. And then the other thing, we don't do a great job at this at all. But just like literally complimenting one another. Mm-hmm. Right? Like I'm like, she's not the best at complimenting, but I'm like anti-compliment. I'm always correcting, right? So I come from an athletic background where we literally watched practice and you got yelled at for how you practiced. And so not even the game. And so it's like, I live like that, like every day's practice for these games. And it's just like, oh, we can correct this and correct that, correct this and correct that. And then I don't do enough complimenting. It's like, oh, after all that correction, I think that I suck. It's like, no, it's because I think you're brilliant. That's why I'm correcting you. And it's, again, something that's very helpful to be communicated. So she has contact of the quote unquote criticism. Yeah. So I think those things that we use to support us what helps us to stay in the zone. I don't know.
I think guys in general, especially those of us just like you, growing up in sports or whatever, there's constant critiques, right? And so I was the same way, not being good at complimenting. And so one of the ways I'm able to compliment more is we pray together first thing in the morning, and part of that is really just praying blessing. Right. And compliment, and you're really complimenting in that process. And so kind of had to actually put some things in place to almost force me to compliment. Otherwise, like, just like you, Darryll, I'm like, yeah, I can point out every flaw and everything. And then she just gets pissed at me.
Because, I don't know my own flaws. Thank you very much.
In case you don't know.
It's not staring back at me in the mirror every day.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that reminds me of friends of ours that we had on our podcast. The husband and wife worked together, and he gave her a performance appraisal, and it was not good. And I said to him, "Well, how did that go over in the bedroom?" Because she was not happy. Of course, It's like,
So, Brittany, you're going to share something?
Oh, it's very, yes, everything Darryll said, the external relationships and, the thing that comes up for me is when I'm like in a consistent expression, which is something I'm working on, but it's like, I've been in support roles for so long, and I know that I'm in a season of like, hey, I have stages of my own, and I have speaking of my own and writing of my own. The more that I'm in that, it's easier when we get into these constructive criticism conversations, because I feel like I've had enough of an outlet as an individual that when we come back together and things need to be worked on or, fixed and stuff, I'm like, okay, I'm fueling myself in my own lane. So I have enough in the tank through work that I've done individually. So when we come together, it's not just like draining and I'm already on empty.
Yeah, that's good.
And he has his own version of that. Like, well, I don't want to speak for you, but like if he goes too long and doesn't speak, it's very like backed up. Like speakers have to speak, right? Like you guys know this. It's like I have to put this somewhere right now. Give me a message.
He just doesn't get in front of the fireplace and start speaking to the family. I mean, you got a built-in audience of 5, right?
We know when we're in our own lane and feeling ourselves, coming together is a lot easier because it's not pulling from something that's empty. We're coming together as, we've already filled up.
So is there something you guys do that's intentional, like on a daily basis or a weekly basis, to give each other encouraging words?
Yeah. So we've been doing these daily check-ins, and that's really been helping us. every morning, 7:45, 8 o'clock. We'll sit out here. It's supposed to be 15 minutes, but it ends up being like an hour a lot of times. But that's our time to. We try different things during that time. Sometimes it's an update. Sometimes we got this weekly worksheet that we're doing to communicate and affirm each other and that type of thing. And then we kind of just, we've done different things in different seasons. So we kind of use all those tools and strategy in that time frame. So yeah, that would be our intentional thing every single day. And then for our business, every week we have a standing meeting. That's usually like a 90-minute thing that we go through and we make sure.
Is that Mondays at 3:30?
Because that's when ours are.
Is it really? Mondays at 12. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Time change.
So that's more 9 o'clock. Okay, so we'll be thinking about you guys.
So as soon as y'all getting around coffee and all that, we're in the trenches right now.
But we start that meeting with wins.
Yep.
And so we don't, they're bullet pointed, they're like jotted down, and because it's us in that meeting, there are business wins, and we throw in like family or personal wins.
Yep.
Yeah.
And most of the rest of the agenda is like business stuff, but those we make sure to put in there.
Yeah.
So so we have those touch points for sure.
Cool. So talk to us now about what you guys are doing and how your past basically is like converging into kind of what you're doing right now.
It's beautiful. You want me to go?
You go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a juicy question.
So I can answer it on a very business specific level, then I can actually like go deeper into like what that looks like and where that comes from. Like, so like from a simple standpoint, like we're helping, leaders to grow their movements with their message through doing TEDx talks or speaking on any type of stage in order to generate revenue for their business, whether that's directly from being paid from the stage or indirectly from, leads that they generate, that they close in their coaching, consulting courses, books, whatever it is that they're selling. Yep. I primarily bring the storytelling gift, and my background's in integrated public relations, and have a gift from God to be able to communicate, emotions through story. So I'm like doing a lot of that with them. And then she's helping with, we say like message to movement. So I'm like the message and she's like the movement, right? Like I can help people to feel impact and all this, but what they do after that is like, you should probably talk to Brittany. So she's operations and, making sure that all even like some of the details that are mentioned so that there's greater levels of systems, from a stage to a client contract, she's like a master at that. So she brings her masters, her OBM certifications with my story pizzazz, and that's what we combine to help people in the world to do. But I think there's a deeper conversation there. I think there's a deeper work that we're doing spiritually that stems from our entire life. Right. And so for me, that narrative I opened up with, that I changed everything about myself to fit in with other people. Yeah. There was a gift that was developed to be able to embody people's personality to the degree to which I could build a relationship as if I was a persona. Yeah. So I became a street guy, although I wasn't, in order to gain love, affection, attention from other street people. Now you take that skill set and you apply it to business today. That's all I do. Hey, who's your ideal avatar? Okay, tell me about you, your mission, your backstory, and how can I get in your head and your mind and embody you to be able to make sure that you generate an unlimited amount of leads for your business. Yeah. And so I used that skill, and it was very much birthed from this traumatic upbringing that God turned what the enemy intended for evil and used it for my good. And for her, I see the same thing. Like all of this relational dynamics that she was stuck in, she's really good at helping to make sure the organizational culture is conducted in a way that there's trust at the center of these relationships, and that there's a excellence in the way that things are ran, which I think comes from the lack of excellence that she experienced growing up. So I just think there's a deeper spiritual work that goes into it for us. And that's really what we try to make sure that we're doing, other than just like the business growth side of it.
Yeah, that's so good. So last question, how do you two define success? Brittany, we'll start with you. Or you can pass to Darryl if you need a little time.
Darryl's shaking his head no.
Success for me is a couple things. First though is like, are we in the will of God? Are we in step and in sync and in season with where He's asked us to be? And if the answer is yes, then we're successful. And then peace. I know not every day is peaceful, but do we have this like deep peace about where we're headed and the legacy that we're leaving and the people that we serve and the way that we are with each other and our kids? Like, you can have this like nagging feeling like this just isn't it. And to me, that's not success. Success is like, regardless of how hard the day was or the weeks or the months, like I have a deep peace that this is the path. And I would call that success.
That's good. All right, Darryl.
Cooperation with God. Like in all areas of life. Like for me, if I'm cooperating with Holy Spirit in all areas of my life, I'm successful. If I'm out of that in resistance to that, I'm headed towards not being successful. So for me, that's what I'm trying to gauge on is God in all areas of my life, my faith, my family, my finances, my fitness, my health, my wealth, my relationships, in all areas of life. Am I in cooperation and alignment with you?
Yeah.
Success.
That's good. So Darryl and Brittany, so great to have you guys on our show.
Yes, thank you so much.
A lot of good nuggets there, from your story to marriage, to finding your lane, to how do you define success. You checked a lot of the boxes that we love to hear from couples like you. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.
So we've got in the show notes, we've got the links to the website, darrylstinson.com. Of course, their TEDx website, tedxalexanderpark.com, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Any other way folks should try and reach out to you?
That works. All works. Right. Apparently I'm easy to find. I don't know about my life.
Look for Darryl. He's easier to find. Yeah. but Brittany's on her way. So anyways, thank you all for coming on again. And for you listening, I know this has impacted you. So please share this with another married entrepreneur who needs to hear this. And we'd love to have a review from you as well. So until next week, God bless. Thank you for listening to the Thriving in Tandem podcast. Please visit our website, marriedentrepreneur.co, for a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business succeed.
And feel free to leave us a review and share this episode with another married entrepreneur. That would mean so much to us.
See you next week.